I'm author Mark Muncy,
And I'm author Erika Lance.
and this is Eerie Travels. Greetings, travelers.
Greetings.
Oh man, what a journey this has been, and what a journey we have continuing. So
Yes. Today we get to do a weird one, and it's based off of a news story I found, and then finding a nerd who wants to talk about it.
are you saying we have a guest?
I'm saying we have a guest, but first I'm going to read my news article, and then we can introduce.
We have news?
We have news. We have news from
Breaking news.
Breaking news from live LIVE science.com is a haunting mermaid mummy discovered in Japan is even weirder than scientists expected. And it's so in 2022, the researchers discovered the mermaid, which is about 12 inches, so about a foot long, lying inside a sealed wood box in a Japanese temple. And they thought it was the torso and head of a monkey sewed onto a decapitated fish body.
Fiji mermaid.
Yeah. So, but apparently it's not. And this the fisherman who found it sometime between 1736 and 1741, supposedly. Now, there's a whole thing on this and how it's got DNA. They don't know exactly, that it wasn't sewn together. It's got all these different sort of parts, pieces. It's a weird situation. But apparently the lower half of it did actually come from a fish, likely a species called a croaker. Yeah. It's apparently a ray fin fish that makes a croaking sound with its swim bladder. Anyway, I'm not going to get into all that, but they're not able to identify the total DNA on this particular creature.
So the top half is the problem. So
yeah, the top half is apparently the issue, including with its little hands and stuff like that. So it's just super duper creepy. And also, the Little Mermaid movie is coming out, which just leads me to believe in mermaids again, because I always wanted to be a mermaid when I was younger. Like, I want to be like Splash. Does everybody remember the movie Splash?
Oh yeah, heck yeah.
With Daryl Hannah. I love that movie.
When it got on Disney Plus, they extended her hair to cover her butt, which was hysterical. So
oh really?
Yeah, they digitally enhanced her hair to cover her butt when she comes up out of the water the first time. Because it's Disney Plus, we can't have any, we can't have booty. Yeah.
And have booty, but Daryl Hannah's booty at the time back in the 80s was amazing.
That was
but glorious. I wanted to be the person that could go in a bathtub and fill it with salt, and I'd have a mermaid tail. And
yeah, exactly. But then, but all you had to do is work at Weeki Wachee for, a few weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
But oh my gosh, yeah, no. Speaking of booty coming out of the water, we have a guest.
We do. What? Wait, I'm not even gonna ask.
And there was no segue there. There was nothing I could do except for the fact that she sometimes writes books about creatures with magnificent booties. So
okay.
That would be the only thing I could come up with. So all right, well, without further ado, I would like to welcome the lovely Valerie Willis with us here today.
Woo!
Yes.
I'm here, much to Erika's demise.
Oh,
dun dun dun! I have encroached now two podcasts of Erika's.
Hey, it works. That's how I did it.
Drinking with authors. Everyone knows me as the interrupting cow. It's okay.
It's all good.
I'm excited. I wanted to be a marine biologist for the longest time growing up. So I know an insane amount of ocean life, but I also am the accidental guru and know an insane amount about all sorts of fairies, legends, folklore, and superstitions.
Okay, so yes, and before we completely go down this particular avenue with you, my friend,
let me on his
I do have to do a little bit of a trigger disclaimer because this, as we wind around how we get to these places, and we're not going to cover every single thing on mermaids, but how we get there, there is some levels of bestiality that end up being discussed lightly during this. So for our wonderful producer, Callie, those are the official trigger warnings. So if anything like that bothers you, you just might want to be aware as you're listening to this particular podcast. So, okay, trigger warnings in place. So Val, where do you think we should begin when we're talking about mermaids?
Well, I mean, we can, there's so much to start with. Like right now, it's so hard finding anything about mermaid sightings or legitimacy because of a whole fiasco created by Animal Planet. So back in 2012, Animal Planet thought it was a grand idea to do a whole series of mockumentaries. And one of those was Mermaids, The Body Found. And then they even tried to follow it up with a TV series, Mermaids in The New Evidence, with 2 episodes, and then immediately got canned because the science community lost their shit. All their legitimacy and all the research was now just out the window. Like when you look up mermaid sightings, 90% of what you're seeing is just regurgitated from this mockumentary every time. And that includes the most common ones I know is the Israel mermaid. That's from that show. There's one from 2013 Spain or whatever. No, that one's also one. There's another one where it's like off in the distance. Like most of the mermaid sightings and videos being spread everywhere is from the mockumentary, and it's really sad because it kind of ruins the legitimacy of finding a real mermaid, right? And it drives me nuts. But outside of that, we also have some very interesting pieces that are happening, right? So the most recent TikTok and viral thing on Instagram and even Facebook is you see an image of someone putting a camera on a shark and letting the shark back out in the wild. But the problem is the stitched content that follows that are from everywhere. And ironically, because I'm a complete nerd, the last scene with the mermaid swimming with, and then there's 2 different versions of video. There's one with a mermaid with seaweed, and then there's just a mermaid swimming overhead. Both those last videos aren't even in the same ocean space. 2, sharks don't look up. Sharks don't look up. Like, they have lateral lines. They hunt with scent and vibration. They go side to side. If they almost have to like do a spiral. Like if you ever seen footage of a shark, they swim out and back around to go up or down. And that's because they need that distance because they're fish, and fish have swim bladders, and swim bladders compress and release. It's almost like having an inbuilt life vest as a gut element. That's also where the croaker gets its name, because when it does, its swim bladder actually makes a croaking sound, and there's quite a few species of that here in Florida. They're always fun to catch because they sound like little pigs when you and they could be just tiniest little fish, and they're like and it's like, oh, catfish are also famous for grunting and being croakers. But yeah, so I'm like, but the last 2 bits of footage are taken from a wonderful and very fun to follow social media influencer called Mermaid Melissa. She goes all over the place. She's one of the first pop culture mermaids that could prove that swimming in the famous fins that they've developed, that you could do it in the wild, right? You can go to natural water spaces and use these, but please, have safety, have someone nearby just in case you get in over your head.
And but some shark does decide that you look tasty.
Yeah. Or you find yourself struggling to swim and someone has to rescue you because we were not built to be mermaids.
No.
And and it's just funny because it's like I look at that footage, her footage gets stolen from mermaid sightings all the freaking time, and it cracks me up. And I think what happens is she's out doing a photo shoot. People don't know she's out doing a photo shoot, and then
Yes.
people take footage of her from another angle, thinking it's a legitimate mermaid. So, for example, she went to Mexico and did a whole photo shoot in a cenote there. But now there's a whole rash of mermaids sighted in a Mexican cenote. And I'm like, it's Melissa. I recognize the tail shape,
Yep.
you know? But you know, the way they were taking pictures is her camera guy is where the light is, and then this other footage is from behind, so she's just a silhouette. And I'm like, I'm sure that fucking scared the shit out of someone.
That was the late great Riku Browning from Silver Springs. You know, and he was one of the first mermaids at Weeki Wachee. He was one of the trainers, and of course he was the creature from the Black Lagoon in the movies. He was the underwater creature. And a couple times when people approached him about seeing mermaids and stuff, he was like, oh, we were doing a photo shoot for Silver Springs, you know, outside the springs, and that's where you saw it. So yeah, so that is quite a common misconception, is a lot of mermaid sightings are these, you know, nowadays it's most likely an influencer you know, or a cosplayer. I've seen quite a few cosplayers do charity work as mermaids now, which is really nice. They go to children's hospitals, they go to things like that and do shows. You know, it's nice, especially now that Weeki Wachee is state owned and everything else. So, but yeah, so
State-owned?
it's state owned now. It's owned by the state of Florida.
Yeah,
Is it
yeah.
considered an actual park now
It
then?
is
Like
considered a state park, and you can still go and see the mermaid show, but you can also now go to the preserve for the springs. So, and they're still mapping them. I mean, when they first found it, it was so deep. They, you know, he found like tractors and appliances, and all those people just dumped it in there because it was, you know, out of sight, out of mind. You know, it was, and it is in the middle of nowhere, Florida, so they didn't think anybody would ever be doing anything with it. But the water was so clear, like Silver Spring style, that they just kept pulling it up. But they still don't know exactly how deep that goes. They're still
No.
they can't, divers can't get down that far, and they're trying to get one of those wonderful submarines to go down like they do, you know, out to the Titanic and stuff. But it's too narrow in places to get down there. So
Man. But yeah, Weeki Wachee's fascinating because wasn't he like a Navy frogman, like before they had the Navy
that's
SEALs?
what started him. That's what started this, and he was an Olympic swimmer before that.
Yeah, and then he hooks up. If I remember, it was, I can't remember their names because I did research on this at one point. I've done research.
Of course you did. Of course you did.
The two girls who helped him build that were Olympian synchronized swimmers.
Yes.
Which makes a lot of sense when you see their performance and stuff like that. So,
and then breathing through the hose, you know, that was just such an amazing technique, and they still use it today, which is, you know, they haven't got a better way of doing it. So,
well,
oh man,
soon we'll be able to do gill implants, and that'll be a thing.
Okay.
Feel about that?
Why not? Why not? Eventually, have you not seen the Hunger Games and where they talk about the different things that they do?
Oh yeah. I mean, who needs a cure for cancer? Let's work on that.
Yeah.
We can breathe underwater.
That was the easier problem.
Implanting gills may be easier than curing cancer. Mark,
That's true.
so.
That's true. True that. So, and it also might help us when, you know, when we do all live underwater, as all the ice caps melt. So
no, my favorite episode of Futurama is when they decided to take Atlanta and make it and then it became the lost city of Atlanta, not Atlantis. And they're like, how'd you turn into mermaids? With the caffeine from the Coca-Cola cat.
Yep. I love they had the Delta hub was still there, even though it was underwater. So it
was good. It was good. But yeah, but
I like that you guys got sidetracked. That's my favorite part of this, is just listening to you and watching you go left and then like left and then right. And I'm like, okay, they can take themselves on wild, ridiculous journeys into things.
Okay. So well, you didn't stop us. So Valerie, tell us where do mermaids come from? Where is the original OG?
I mean, some people believe that there's images on the Cave of Swimmers out in Libya that have pictures of mermaids, but I've looked at the pictures, I've looked at the history there. A lot of people forget that the Sahara Desert at one point had ocean water running through it. It was a wetland. It was swamp, brackish waters, much like Florida. So, so a lot of the cave paintings they find out there are about tribes who swim and interact with the environment through water and things like that. I know that again, the documentary Mermaids took those cave paintings and altered them to look like mermaids at one point. And it's like, no, that's not the Cave of Swimmers. That's doctored up images to kind of mimic what has been found. But mermaids have been in lore and legend for a long time. And we're talking about there's Baltic, the Finnish have a really interesting one. They believe that, I have to look it up because there's so many names and I get them all mixed up. So the Hafru is a Danish one that collects the dead bodies, that they would pass these and they would be collecting dead bodies in the ocean or when they toss out their dead or something like that, which is pretty crazy. And then the Finnish have the Naki and the Naki Nie, which is also believed in a lot of the Slavic and Scandinavian tribes at the time. But this one is interesting because the female is sometimes described as just a water nymph, a very pale woman. Sometimes she's half fish and half woman, but she tends to cattle in her lake and around the lakes, right? But the man, the Naki, shows up as like a half man, half horse, fish horse. I don't know.
Wow.
Is that like an underwater centaur?
Yes, it's an underwater centaur.
Okay.
I was gonna say seahorse, but that works too.
No.
Mine is cooler. It's an underwater centaur.
The underwater centaurs, and he helps her herd her cattle, her water cattle. And I'm like, does she ride on top of it? Or the logistic? There's gonna be a story.
Wow. I
There's
guess I should have had other disclaimers during this.
Yeah. I was gonna say, wait a minute, we missed that one. So
yeah, exactly.
But it's interesting because there's so many different varieties, like we hear about sirens all the time and people are like, oh, sirens are a type of mermaid. No, they were seabird, half woman, half seabird.
Okay, so pause, super excited. A mermaid is a half human, half fish that swims in the water. A centaur, for those that might not know, is a half human, half horse, but now half human, half seahorse, so water centaur. A siren, the myth of the siren is it used to lure sailors to their death because it would sing these things and they'd go overboard, right? That was the whole myth of the siren.
And they're famous for being in the
famously,
Iliad, the Odyssey, and Jason the Argonauts. They're very Greek mythology based.
Exactly.
Okay. Continue.
Oh, I'm trying to practice. I'm practicing the wait my turn.
Well, so let's talk about what people have mistaken, because there's a lot of animals that have been mistaken for mermaids.
Oh, quite a few.
So if we go with most recent, there's footage of a dolphin pod out in Maui that has been rebranded multiple times, has received like 60 million views out there. And it's a giant, it's one of the largest dolphin pods in the world. You can find older footage, but someone, I can't remember the research group, but a research group went out there, used a drone to capture above because it was a nice clear day, and they could actually get some good footage of them. And the interesting thing about this, and it does make one wonder, is as you're watching from above, as these dolphins are jumping out of the water, their pectoral fins, when they come rushing out of the water, throws water forward, and it almost looks like hands swimming, but very fast, obviously. So a lot of people took that dolphin pod footage and was like, look, this is a pod of mermaids swimming, and because it's so far up, like people are like squinting and trying to see the dolphins, but it can be very easily mistaken for like a bunch of mermaids throwing their arms out and
okay.
and things like that.
So, what would a bunch of mermaids be? Because there's like a murder of crows and a, gaggle. And so what would entire group of mermaids be? Is this known yet?
I don't know.
I think it's still called a pod. Yeah.
I would think it's a pod, just like other sea mammals.
Yeah, pod of mermaids doesn't sound nearly as cool
It's
as
not
it
as
is.
exciting.
Yeah.
I'm sure hey, somebody in the comments, leave us.
Yeah,
leave us a
does
note
someone
what you think
know?
it should be called. So we'd appreciate that. So.
We'd appreciate that. There's got to be a term for it. A palace of mermaids. That would be.
There you go.
I'm being creative. The other footage that I've seen, and of course, I did a really, really deep dive recently this past week, so I can be up to snuff. Is I noticed there was a lot of footage of what looked like a beached mermaid, right? But there's always a cloth thrown over the top half, and you just see this, and it's a very long bodied. One of the most common sea mammals that beaches itself on beaches that people forget exist is pilot whales. They're very long bodied and very easily recognized by the shape. So a lot of these footage, and I know this because when I worked at an exotic vet office for 3 years, Doc Stevens used to help SeaWorld all the time. And beach pilot whales were like, I've seen a billion pictures and I've seen footage. I've been out on the beach to help with stuff like this, right? So I'm like, yeah, that's a beach pilot whale if I've ever seen one. Like every time I see those footage, and no one ever gets a picture of the top half. And the reason for that is because it's a whale. And it's very interesting because this isn't the first time that people have tried really hard to take something that's natural and just relabel it, right? So back in the 16th century, the sailors used to bring home what they called the Jenny Hanevers. Which were like these it had like a triangular head. You can kind of see a face there. It had these little frills, what look like little arms. It even tapers off a little bit and looks like it's got a belly button and 2 legs and a tail, right? But all these are dried up skates. And for those who don't know what a skate is, it's almost like a shark combined with a stingray, right? And if you've ever seen the underside of a stingray, it looks very, very interesting. You can kind of almost make out a face. And because skates are so close to sharks, they actually do have they have belly buttons. A lot of people don't realize most sea mammals and even some species of shark have belly buttons.
Sharks have belly buttons? Like,
yes.
I didn't know that. Did you know that, Mark?
I learned that from like Shark Week season 2.
I learned that from Shark Week season 2. I'm the bestest and I watch nature shows.
I only watch Shark Week. Thank you.
Okay.
So yes, they do. So these little dried up gifts used to be like tchotchkes that they used to hand out or trade with or bring back home to family all the time.
Wow.
Pretty epic. But then we get to where both not just Christopher Columbus mistook them as mermaids, but also Captain John Smith, as in that John Smith from Pocahontas.
Okay, wait. Before we get into 2 people who did terrible things, regardless of what Disney movies it said, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Eerie, Appalachia. Gear up for a frightful jaunt into the darkest reaches of the ancient Appalachians. Folks deep within the Appalachian hollers lean close to the campfire to share stories of the inexplicable with hushed awe. Monsters rumbling in the hills, strange lights darting through the pitch black night sky, horrible occurrences almost ineffable in their bizarre tragedy. Tall tales, you might say. Tell that to the Flatwoods monster in Braxton County, West Virginia, or the Goat Man of Louisville. Look into his humanoid eyes and let him know you don't believe. And what of those apparitions in Mammoth Cave's Corpse Rock, or the Satan spawn known as the Jersey Devil? How do you respond when confronted by these mysteries? From the metaphysical energy that swirls near Serpent Mound in Ohio to Point Pleasant's Mothman legacy, Mark Muncy and Carrie Schultz explore the dark history lurking in the shadows of Appalachia. Read by Mark Muncy, author and experts on strange folklore with appearances on shows such as Ancient Aliens, The Curse of Robert the Doll, and many, many more.
Greetings, mortals and others. I'm Dick Terhune, the voice from hell. I work with haunted attractions all over the US, Canada, and Europe to increase audiences and enhance their experience with highly effective commercials, narrations, animatronic character voices, whatever your dark heart desires. Let me help you do more, scare more, profit more. Find out more at Voice from Hell on Facebook and at voicefromhell.com.
And we're back.
We're back to talk about two
Oh.
absolutely terrible figures in history. Let's do that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Christopher Columbus and Captain John Smith from Pocahontas is what most people are going to know him from.
Yeah.
Not great. I mean, a lot of questionable stuff there, but
Historical figures.
What they both did as historical figures and have journal entries and noted is they mistook manatees and dugongs as mermaids.
Right.
Now, granted, I have seen many manatee in my life. I don't know how you would mistake them because they're like, you know what they look like to me? They look like giant gray potatoes about the size of a boat floating around.
Yeah.
And there's nothing cute about that. There's nothing humanly looking about that shape. That is a potato. But for some reason, well, let's look at the environment, and dugongs and manatees are called sea cows, and rightfully so, because that's what they do. They're grazers. They graze the seaweed and the green algae, and they will get themselves so tangled, and sometimes they're so slow moving that algae starts to grow on them. So they can look like green, hairy. They can look like they have long, flowing green locks of hair, But the most interesting thing about dugongs and manatees, and even dolphins, and by the way, dolphins are very horny creatures, and I'll tell you how I know this. This is a whole thing. But the females have a body part that looks very much like a human's body part there. And I can only imagine
a lower half body.
You
part.
can say vagina. Why
Vagina.
can't you say
Okay,
vagina? What are we in
They have
preschool or
vaginas.
something?
I
Say the word
don't
vagina.
know.
Okay,
I
say
don't
it
know where I
three times.
have
I don't know how far
to
the
announce
kindergarten
this
goes.
news. So
Sheesh.
when I was younger, I went on a cruise to the Bahamas. We did the dolphin encounter, and the woman made it very clear of the following thing. And she goes, do not touch below the belly button. You don't want to start something you cannot stop or finish. And it's like, holy crap. And of course, there's also the famous King of the Hill episode where Hank makes the same mistake. And there's even stories of people do accidentally not following the rules. But that's the chaos of it, is that so there is a lot of speculation that sailors may have hooked up with dolphins, dugongs, and manatees and things like that throughout history. But that doesn't mean it stops there in the past, right? With sailors in the 16th, 17th, and even 18th centuries. In 1960s, NASA funded an experiment to try to teach dolphins to speak through their blowholes.
Yeah.
This is a real thing.
It actually, I think it actually started. Yeah, they were originally trying to teach them so that they could look for landmines in World War II or sea mines in World War II, and then because of that and the progress they made during that, that's when they reopened that in the 60s and said, maybe we can make them talk.
Yeah. So the research assistant, Margaret Ho Lovat, quickly bonded with one of the dolphins named Peter, who by the 5th week of the experiment, Peter begins to show signs of sexual attraction to Margaret, as she claimed. And according to a telegraph, that she decided, without consulting anyone else, but she decided that she should administer relief for Peter because the advances were so aggressive.
Oh, this is ladies and gentlemen, Guillermo del Toro's Shape of Water, Oscar-winning film.
And that is an amazing film if one hasn't seen it and talking about mer people.
It's
Oh,
inspired
yes.
by this story. He admits this is what did it. He's like, this is a creature from the Black Lagoon. He's like, what if the creature from Black Lagoon got the girl? You know, so
Yeah. No, and it's done. Yeah, and it's yeah, that story's and even the movie was beautifully done. It's
Yeah.
I got to give him credit. You know,
This science experiment, however, was not
it
No.
was
really done.
No. And if that wasn't bad enough, during the summer of 1970, Malcolm Brenner proclaimed that he had fallen in love with a dolphin. He had been hired to take photos for a children's book of Dolly, who was a dolphin at a archaic theme park known as Florida Land. I think
Oh, man.
later it became Marine Land for
Yeah.
a hot minute
Marine
after
Film,
that.
one of the creature from the Black Lagoon movies. Yep.
Yep.
The creature-
And basically he claimed that him and Dolly were having consensual sexual relations with one another.
Wow.
And he got, you know, obviously
All kinds of
that did not go well at all. But so this is a thing with, and you know, and it makes one wonder about mermaids and things. I mean, even with the Irish folklore of the Marrow, and it's interesting because it's usually the Irish Scottish based mermaid folklores and superstitions where they talk about intermarrying with the species a lot, and that you would know that you have accidentally married or made offspring with a Marrow because your children would come out with webbed hands or feet or scaly skin and things like that. But it also could have been their way of explaining malformations or inbreeding and things like that too. So it's always very interesting. And even when you look at the word mermaid, the etymology behind it, it only dates back, I think 14th century was the earlier edition of the actual word mermaid. It doesn't go as far back as you would suspect, especially when you have Greek mythology and all these others and Scandinavian tribal things. These date back into the BC era, but mermaid, the word, is only a 14th century word, and its oldest derivative is merwife, and then it was used on signs of taverns and inns. And what I believe, this is purely speculation, I believe the mermaid in the term was meant to be sea wife. So when sailors came home, they would look for those mermaid signs because they were without wives, but the tavern and inn picked up the slack, right? So they would go home to their mermaids. And I kind of use this conjunction a lot. I wrote a short story called The Fisherman's Tale, and it's about 5 fishermen at the end of a dock who are trying to fish their way into forgiveness with their wives. And
Right.
by the end of it, a mermaid shows up and she's like, my shit's been stolen. Can you help me? And the guy's like, well, what do I get if I help you get your stuff back from these fishing gurus that have already hauled ass, you know? And he's like, oh, I'll be your wife. And he's like, no, thanks, hard pass. You know, so it's a really, you know, it's that spin, because spending a lot of time fishing with my dad in my interest in marine biology, they're always telling jokes of you know, the old chain and ball and things like that. So
Ball and chain.
Ball and chain. See, I always flip it every time.
All
Time.
good. It's all
So
good.
that's some interesting things. And I mean, there's even like a recipe called a mermaid's pie, which is a suckling pig wrapped in bread and crust and cooked as such.
A suckling mermaid. Okay, so my question for you though, Val, because you've done a lot of Greek mythology, things like that, right? And we talk a lot on the show about we don't know what's out there, right? We just don't. So the question becomes, do you think there are mermaids?
We have no idea what the ocean holds. I mean, we're discovering new stuff all the freaking time. In fact, I think, Mark, we were talking just before this started that there, even in a lake, there's new stuff being discovered,
Yep.
right? Over in,
Awesome.
I think, China or Hong Kong area, where I loved how the headliner was, cube with 24 eyes discovered in lake. And I'm like,
Yeah, that was
it makes it feel like out of science fiction, but what it is, it's a box jellyfish that's living in brackish water, eating the shrimp in this lake, freshwater shrimp, which shows that at one point this lake was probably connected to the ocean, and these have evolved, and they're starting to multiply enough that we can now notice them. And I know in previous episodes of Airy Travels, you guys talk about, you know, the giant squid, and then they discovered the colossal squid. Like, oh crap, there's one bigger than
we think
that.
there's even bigger down there, you know, which is, you know, crazy. So
Right.
So do we think they exist? Because you see a lot of videos now. Part of this, me and you talked a little bit about this, because there are some really good
There's some
things.
really good videos.
Yeah. That
And-
make
and-
it,
yeah, that was the earlier part where we were talking is, you know, that a lot of these
Sure.
influencers videos are being edited into things. And I even saw some footage from the great movie Dagon, which was a 80s, you know, crazy horror film loosely based on a Lovecraft story, and they actually edited some of that footage into it, into the same. It was basically the same start of one and then edited to that. And then we've, you know, I've got to talk about a little place down here in St. Pete that was part of a lot of people in this area's childhood. You know, we talk about Weeki Wachee. That's the obvious go-to for your travel for this, is go to Weeki Wachee, and which is just north of Tampa Bay, and go enjoy some mermaids. But there was a
and
place
kayaking and canoeing. There's a lot of stuff. You can make
there's
it
a lot of stuff together, and it's a
full
great
day.
spring. You can go look for manatees. There's manatees there because they winter there. They like to spring there, and it is early spring, so it is you know, happy season. And that was funny, walking down the bay not the other day. I saw two manatees enjoying each other's company, and a dolphin, speaking of dolphins, was swimming around going, "Hey, what you guys doing? What you guys doing? Can I join in? Can I join in?" I was like, "Yep, horny dolphins." But downtown St. Petersburg, there was this place called Web City, and it was the world's unique drugstore, weirdest drugstore, most unique drugstore. It was all this thing. There's actually a musical about it called Webb's World, and it was basically the first place to be a giant big box retailer. They had, you know, 10 cents, you could go watch a chicken dance, and you could do all this stuff. But in the meantime, he had, you know, dollar meat and, you know, all these things just piled up everywhere. And he would do all these things to get people in. But one of the most famous attractions there was Lorelei's Cove. And it was where you could go see mermaids. And that was because he heard about Weeki Wachee, saw all the people going to pay dollars to go see Weeki Wachee. He figured for a quarter, you could go in and see mermaids at one of the corners of his shop. And he turned it into this paper mache cave, and he put these mannequins in there, and they were the most terrifying things you will ever see in your life. And then they would give a microphone to one of the girls that worked behind the counter, and they would, you know, and the mom would hand you know, a quarter to the cashier and say, "Hey, can you have one of my kids go see Lorelei's Cove? I'm going to go over here and buy a bunch of cheap fish." And so she went, "Okay." And then you would hear over the loudspeaker, Danielle, come to Lorelei's Cove." And then the kid would go in there to this creepy ass room with these mannequins, and the mannequins would talk to him and tell them these things. And all these people were emailing me when I first started doing Erie, Florida, and Freaky Florida, about this creepy cove with mermaids in it that terrified them as children, and they were having nightmares about it. It was supposed to be this wonderful thing for kids to go talk to mermaids, and it was terrifying them. And apparently at one point, one of the mannequins' arm fell off, or one of the mannequins' head fell off, and it was still talking. And it's just, oh my God, just terrifying. Like, the only cool thing about Webb's World, Web City, it's gone now, but there's a few plazas still named where it was. It's still named after. It's a Publix now. But one of the things they invented was they kept seeing all these people coming in, and then they'd see the crowds and just leave. So the son came up with this brilliant idea of, how about we have a checkout lane for 10 items or less, so people could just come in and grab the things. And that stayed. And guess what? That's where that all started, was
really
down here. Yeah. So a little history for you, some real history thrown in with the mermaid history.
this Listen, the mermaid history is very real. It's just not real mermaids.
Yeah, and the other place, if you want to see Fiji mermaids by the dozens,
Oh,
go to Ripley. Any of the Ripley's museums have them because
Yeah.
Robert Ripley loved collecting those. And then also, you
Wait,
can-
let's talk about what a Fiji mermaid is.
okay, Fiji mermaids were to bank in on this mermaid fever. People taxidermy would overseas would taxidermy a half of a monkey with half of a fish. They would put those together, sew them together, and that's where you would get what looked like a mermaid carcass. And most famously, P.T. Barnum was the first one to start showing it off. And then once he started showing it off, everybody went overseas to buy them. A lot of Indonesia, a lot of the Philippines, they would sell these like crazy. And so people would buy them and then they would have them in their homes because they had the Fiji mermaid too. And then Ringling got into it. And then, of course, Ripley got into it. And the Ripley Museum has dozens of them. And one of the fun things of working in the Ripley's archives is you're opening boxes to catalog them. And usually it's shrunken heads or Fiji mermaids. That's just, you open up a box and that's what's in there.
Oh, we need to do an episode on shrunken heads at some point.
oh yeah. In the oddity shop over here in what is it, Winter Park has both shrunken
Prometheus
heads and a
Esoterica.
Fiji
Yes.
mermaid. Yes, I was just there the other weekend. I'm gonna be honest. I missed out on the bone sale. And then my husband's like, "Wait, what were you going to do with a bag of bones?" I'm like, "I don't know."
Don't know. Yeah. What aren't you going to do with a bag of bones? That's the question. So,
So-
Oh my gosh.
So
Yeah,
let's talk about mermaid sightings that haven't been debunked.
there we go.
That are pretty solid, or at least had multiple witnesses and interesting. I think the most famous one. I mean, if you were going to be a mermaid, where would you be in the world, right? Hawaii. Why
Yeah.
not, right?
Yeah,
So
that's where I would be.
I think it's the Kaiwi Point mermaid, I think is what they refer to her as. She's been sighted for many years. Sometimes swimming with dolphins, sometimes not. Sometimes she spooks divers because there's a lot of dives over the reefs and stuff over there. But on April 12th in 1998, there were several eyewitnesses. They went out on a boat, there was a pod of dolphins, and among these dolphins was reported a single mermaid, not like the pod, Maui pod, right? Dolphin pod. This is a single mermaid among them. And they could tell because when she leapt out of the water, it was much different. They could see her make out a face and hair and the whole 9 yards. And apparently either it was later that day I think it's later that day, some of those same people who had spotted her were out diving on the reefs. And there were pictures that I think his name is Jack. I can't think of his last name. But Jack took pictures because he noticed something swim above and he turned and he took 2 pictures. And I think these pictures are very interesting because they're not like because we talked a little bit earlier about the pop culture mermaid. And when you look at their style of tails and how much of a back fin they need to propel themselves and the shape that their legs fold into those does not match what this image shows at all.
Yeah, she actually looks half fish. Yeah.
Yeah, she truly looks half fish. Like it's definitely like a porpoise tail, very similar to a pilot whale or a dolphin. But it tapers so tightly and too soon for feet to be involved at all. But it definitely looks, like a woman. And there was several people who sighted her and saw her jumping out of the water and things like that. So that would be like one of the most famous ones, I think, out there. But more recently has been, they've been doing work on a dam out in Zimbabwe. And this is around October 2012. They needed to replace 3 engines on the bottom of this dam and a lake reservoir. Now, locally, the tribes have had a beer festival to ward off the mermaids in the lake. And of course, it hasn't been practiced for quite some time, but many of the elders and many of the locals believe that mermaids lived in this lake, hands down, like without question. So when the dam needed repairs, they sent crew members down there, and within 3 days they said, nope, we're not going down again, because each time they had dove in the last 3 days, either the male or a female or both mermaids would be spotted peering at them or swimming past them and spook them off. So naturally the company is like, all right, I see what's going on. This is local legend and lore. They don't want the dam repaired. So they hired people out of Ireland and other places. And it only took roughly 30 days again for those guys to be like, no, there is a mermaid down there. There's fucking mermaids down there. And it's funny because you can find reports and a lot of Irish mail news reports there. And so by December, the Zimbabwean government claimed the mermaid was blocking the completion of the dam. The government acknowledged the mermaid. And pretty much asked the elders to perform the festival so they could complete the freaking dam. And it's a beer festival where they're pouring a lot of alcohol in the water, so I can imagine that must repel them if they're very sensitive, like sharks, to smelling things.
Or they just get a big hangover and have to sleep it off. So,
right, or that, get a big hangover.
Yeah, no, we've talked river monsters, we've talked all that, and there are giant catfish, giant sturgeon, giant everything out there. Again, we don't know how big these things grow sometimes, and we think we do. We got the largest ever on record, but then maybe it's bigger. So that's part of this as well. I think one of the sightings I recalled was it tied into that Discovery Channel thing again earlier, was somebody found a body on the beach in again, it was Gulf Coast of Florida. I want to say it's Tampa Bay, but they thought it was a headless body, and they went to find it, and then somebody said, no, it's a mermaid, and it was neither. It was an art project. The guy was making a mermaid, and it had gotten loose in the water, and the head lost somewhere, and the body washed up on shore, and it was a mannequin. But it was and somebody's like, oh, it's for that Discovery Channel thing. No, it was totally just an art project, but still
just a coincidence,
coincidence. But it was funny that all came about at that same time. So
and it's and yeah, it's interesting. And in mermaids are sighted in a lot of different areas too. It doesn't matter how cold. And of course, you also see the famous footage of beluga whales where it looks, the muscles are structured in such a way it looks like knees, and it makes you wonder if someone was drowning. And of course, there's also footage of beluga whales where people drop stuff in the water and they bring them up to them in the wild. Like
very friendly.
They're very friendly, very, so who knows when someone's, falls over the edge of a boat in the 16th century and a beluga whale saves you, that's a mermaid.
Yeah, it's a miracle. It definitely is. It's one of nature's oddities. They actually like to help people and stuff like that. So it's
yes.
And like I said, it doesn't help that World War II we were trying to train dolphins to stop sea mines, and then later on we were trying to talk to them. So it's just, this is how it goes. This is how things evolve. And this is we're still convinced, and then we have our wonderful Douglas Adams, who said the dolphins were the second most powerful species on the planet, behind the mice. And they of course were trying to communicate with us instead of us communicating with them. So, and it was of course the famous last words to humanity, so long and thanks for all the fish.
The fish.
So
but even in 1610, one of the more interesting things that I found was journal entries by Richard Whitbourne about a sighting of a mermaid in the harbor of St. John's over in Canada. And there were several witnesses to this as well. And in short, as they were trying to get to shore, a mermaid tried to crawl up on the boat.
Oh, wow.
And he talks about, how different she looks and how pale she was, and that there were streaks in her hair and everything. And he said that one of the sailors freaked and hit her with the oar to knock her off the boat. and then she swam over to the other boats because they were returning from an expedition, and they panicked and was trying to hit her away from, like, so there was this mermaid in the harbor and boats of sailors who just want to freaking hit the shoreline and go home.
Yeah.
And they're just freaking out because, strangely enough, mermaids weren't a good sign. Like one of the more famous ones would be Blackbeard. Edward Teach has a log entry, and so does some of the.
I was hoping you were gonna bring that one up.
Yeah, where there he's like, no, we got to sail around this area. That's mermaid territory. Because mermaids were not necessarily a good omen at all, and that's why I like the Pirates of the Caribbean in that one movie. They were like rat mermaids.
Yep. And that, you know, look at Peter Pan, the mermaids trying to drown Wendy. You know, it's just, the mermaids are generally not good things. I mean, and if you go by the original Little Mermaid, even that, is a very dramatic and very terrible story. Everybody loves it for the movie, and we've got the new movie, the live action version coming out. But it's, if you go back to the OG, man, that would be a hell of a movie. Traumatize. Sure, we would need all kinds of trigger warnings on that one. So, oh my gosh, people don't realize. So, but always go back to your original stories, gang. They're scarier than anything you can imagine. So.
Yeah, and I think the most unique one I found was a report in 1881. Henry Locks was a fisherman. He always worked on and I'm going to hash this so bad, the Susquehanna River in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, that's right. You got it.
Yes, I got it. But he was out there and he noticed that around dusk, he kept seeing a woman appear. And she would pull herself up on one of the rocks in the river and kind of like look around and watch him fish, to the point that he's like, I thought to shoot her. He's like, but then if she was an actual woman, I would be tried for murder, and that fear was greater. But he saw her multiple times, and he believed that there was a cave in the water, an entrance to a cave in the river someplace that he believed they lived in. But he saw her multiple times, and he was known to be a trustworthy man. Like, many people vouched that this is not someone who drinks. So there are sightings historically that have no means of, they saw something
they don't understand. Exactly. So, and
you know what it's time for? A call out for listener tales.
Yes,
any experiences, listeners or people share your listener tales of your experiences with mermaids.
Yeah, if you have any stories that your family has, and you haven't shared them, please, now's the time. And maybe we can get a mermaid organization out there, just like the BFRO and MUFON for UFOs. So.
Yeah, exactly. To cite mermaids or merpeople. I should say merfolk.
Merfolk.
If there are mermaids, there have to be well, I guess they could be like those flatworms that just are both sexes and will mate with each other.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I still like one of our favorite children's shows that from Disney, which is called Gravity Falls, which we quote quite a bit. That one of Mabel, the young twin, she one of her first boyfriends is a merman who lives in the school pool. And he's got the beautiful hair, and I cannot remember his name. Maybe our producer could chime in with that.
It's Mermando.
Mermando,
of course.
Yeah. He was great.
Yes.
He actually ends up marrying I believe a manatee in like a political marriage.
Yes, he's
and Mabel gets the letter and she's like, I can't find any guys that aren't attached.
Wow.
So good. Highly recommend that show to everyone. And not just because I'm a grunkle who writes spooky stories, but and there's a character in there who is a grunkle who has a house full of spooky things. So,
oh my goodness. And yet we now got sidetracked when I asked for listener tales. So
well, yes, but that is a great listener tale. But anyway, let's go back to that story about the 24 blue-eyed creature in the river.
Yes.
One of the places that covered that is our wonderful friends at Paranormality Magazine.
Ooh.
And they say the scientists discovered a new species of box jellyfish while exploring the brackish water of shrimp ponds at Mai Po Nature Reserve in Hong Kong. This creature has a cube-shaped body and 24 eyes arranged in sets of 6. The new species is now named Tripedilia mapoinus. It is genetically and physically distinct from other box jellyfish. It is less than an inch long and has a see-through body with a whitish tinge. The jellyfish has 3 tentacles extending from each corner of its body and, quote, petal-shaped structures at the base of its tentacles that act like boat paddles, allowing it to swim even faster. Box jellyfish are among the most venomous marine animals in the world. The scientists returned to the area 3 summers in a row and kept finding more and more of these creatures. And it just shows the highlight of rich diversity of marine life in Hong Kong and even all of China. They're now, though Mai Poi area is relatively well studied, makes this finding even more significant. This jellyfish is the first box jellyfish species to be discovered in Chinese waters. And it's pretty amazing. And you can find that at paranormalitymag.com. That's one of their free things on their blog. And if you go and subscribe to their magazine or do anything on there, use the code TRAVELS and get 10% off, and it'll let them know that we sent you. So get some good news.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. And our travel is to go to Weeki Wachee and see the mermaids, potentially the manatees. And again, these are creatures that are not intended to be fed. So do not go there. Don't go and think, I'm going to go swim with the manatees. You need to understand that that might not be the case, right?
Exactly. If you want to see manatees in captivity, there are plenty of places. SeaWorld has them. The Clearwater Marine Aquarium has them, and lots of other fun aquariums have them. And some of the aquariums are now doing mermaid shows with the animals. So where they're putting mermaids in, they're trying to catch in on Weeki Wachee's gigs. So
and if you come to Florida in the colder months, Blue Springs, they pile up in there.
Pile up in Blue Springs. They pile up in any of the inlets, so you can almost find them anywhere.
And I think they have a manatee observation deck. And if you're looking just for magical moments, because mermaids, magic, and water are a thing, Titusville from June to October has bioluminescence out in Mosquito Lagoon, and you can see dolphins, alligators, sharks, and manatees all in one area and glowing under the water at night. It's a pretty cool, epic thing. Also, Hawaii is a good spot. A lot of the divers and
look for that. Look for that mermaid off of Kauai Point. So
yeah, exactly. So, I'm going to Hawaii later this year. I'll let you know if I see any mermaids.
Yeah, please do. And if nothing else, just bring me back some Kona coffee, please.
Yes, no problem. No problem.
No problem. All right. So, well, with that, travelers, I think we've come to the end of this amazing journey. Thank you, Valerie Willis. Where can we find you?
WillisAuthor.com. You can find all my social media and some of the books I've written and books that mythology books that I remake into prettier coffee table pieces on there, along with Saucy Times with Sleeping with Sasquatch.
Yeah, your werewolf book, the classic werewolves is on my desk prominently because I refer to it often, and it's an old classical work, but it has been redone beautifully by you and yours. So,
well, thank you.
But Erika, any final words on mermaids?
My final word is I believe mermaids are real. I think we will eventually find whatever that is. I think very much like a lot of the mythological creatures and cryptids we talk about, it very well could be a nature spirit of some kind that protects the water, and that's why we see them few and far between, because you said it on one of the most recent episodes. There's the cave system we haven't explored, and there's the water we haven't explored. So
I like to hope, but I'm sadly this is the one that I kind of draw the line at. I'm like, all right, I need a little more solid information on this one. So, but especially since there've been so many hoaxes of it, and
that mermaid documentary or mockumentary really took a hit. Mermaid spotting.
They had done the dragon one, and that had been such a hit that they decided to do Mermaids the next year, and then that was a mistake. You know, that was about as bad a mistake as they could make it. So but anyway, gang, thank you all so much for listening. You can, please like, share, subscribe, and send it to your friends, and have your friends send it to friends. We want to explode and be able to do all the travels for you and bring you more and more fun stuff like this. And in the meantime, we'll let Destiny Beard play us out with that haunting siren song of hers, and we will see you on the other side.